Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. We begin the third season in the yearly cycle of the church, the season of the church. So we have three seasons, and three big seasons in the church. We can divide them this way: the season of the Advent, and then the season of Christ, and then the season of the church and the work of the Holy Spirit. So we begin that with the Feast of Pentecost. And it's important that we focus our thoughts, our mind, and our studies to read the Bible on the church as the subject of this season, the last season of the church cycle. This is a good time to read the book of Acts. It's a good time to read the letters of St. Paul and the apostles. It's a good time also to think and meditate and reflect on the church. Me, Kelly, I want to start today by talking about the smallest unit of the church. Church is made of units, of small pieces that has to come together. When the word used for the church is assembly, ecclesia, and the Spanish would call it iglesia. It's Latin, ecclesia, the assembly. The word used in the Old Testament also is the assembly, when people of God come together. Remember the day they came out of Egypt, if you remember the story? They came out of their little houses, the slave houses in Egypt, and they came together outside the cities, in a place where they meet God and they go to the promised land as an assembly. But each of those small units is a nuclear family: father, mother, children. So this is the smallest unit of the church. If I have, and sometimes I go and imagine if I have, and this would be wonderful to have a time machine, and I can go back to the first century and see what happened maybe after Jesus ascended and how the disciples behaved, what happened. If I just can attend one day with them, what would it look like? One day. What would that be like? To attend one day with the apostles. Hi. So when she was waiting for me to say something. So what would it be like? It would be very interesting. And I thought about it and I said, well, I don't have to go to the first century. I don't have to go to the upper room. I can go to a monastery or a convent. I just came from a convent. That's the traditional way. I said, this is how it looked like in the time of the apostles. They meet at the time of prayers, and they go about their business and come back and meet again and pray, and they go again and they come back and pray again 3 times, 4 times a day, 5 times a day. And that's how they spend their life. And then after you go and live there for a while, like you go for 5 days like I went with the girls, you come out with something. You feel like you don't want to go back to the world. We were like in heaven or something. You come out with a lot of peace and joy, reconciliation. You got peace with yourself, you got peace with everybody else, and you got peace with God. What more do you need? You're happy. If God takes you today, you'll be very okay. That's how I feel when I came back from the convent. So you want to look at how it was in the first century, go to a monastery, go to a convent, and there you will experience the same life. You don't have to have a time machine. That's why from time to time we, the people who are not nuns and monks, we like to go visit the monasteries. Because that's exactly what the experience we get. If you have never had that experience, please give it a try. So I want to go and give you a little bit of the intention, what God wanted from a church. What did God want from a church? We might want different things from the church. We want social life, we want friends, we want people who share with us the same faith, we want people who encourage us and take care of us when we are in need. But what did God really want from the church? In the beginning, when I go to, so there's this vision, I can see it, and in God's mind. There's individuals born, each of us is born alone, or maybe you're a twin, born together from the womb of your mother. But then, on top of this individual, there's a unit called the family. On top of the family, there is a local church, St. Paul, Archangel of St. Mary. These are local churches, and it's made of units, made of families. And on top of that, there is a diocese, made of local churches. On top of that, there is a patriarchate, made of parishes. On top of that, there is the universal church. The Catholics, we are their guests, so I cannot say anything. We think it is under the Pope of Rome, but we say no, it's under Christ. All the patriarchs and popes are brothers. Jesus is the head of this universal church. So this is how it looks like. Not individuals. Individuals belongs to families. Families belongs to a local church. Local church belongs to a diocese with a bishop. And those dioceses with a bishop coming together belong to a patriarchate. And a patriarchate belongs to a universal church. The head of that universal church is Jesus himself. And when we argue with the Roman Catholic and say, or the Catholic will say, oh, Jesus is alive. Why do you think of Jesus leading somebody? He is alive. He's managing the church right now from heaven. And we know that all the patriarchs are equal under him. So I go and this time I want to talk about, in relation to the gospel today, Jesus was functioning in his local church, wherever he went. This Israel, it was his church. So what did he do today in that church? He forgave sins and healed. And that's what you and I come to church to experience, forgiveness and healing. Now, when I think about it from the very beginning, so that you understand this is God's mind. This is not an invention. This is not somebody who came up with the idea. Let's just structure the church like that. Universal church, patriarchates, dioceses, local churches, families. This is not invention. This is from the very beginning. And this is how it is written and recorded for us in Genesis 1. From the very first chapter in the Bible, the record is like this. And when we go to verse 26, after God had created the universe and prepared the earth, and the earth now is inhabitable, then God said, let us, plural, make man in our, plural, image, according to our, plural, likeness. Let them, plural, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. When God is thinking of man, it is the Greek word anthropos. Humanity. He's not talking about the Adam. When he's saying, let's create man, God is not imagining a single man. It's humanity. Let's create humanity. That's the word. In our likeness, plural, in our image, so that them have dominion. What's he thinking? What are you thinking, Lord, when you're saying, let's create man? So he says, so God created humans in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. What's male and female? A family. It's a family. This is the first church. This is the first church. So, in the mind of God, the smallest unit of a church is not a single person. The smallest unit of a church is a family. Let me ask you, how does that look like in a Christian family? I'll tell you why monastic life came in the 4th century when people were martyred for Christ, and individuals said, we don't see, after martyrdom is done, Constantine took the reins, no more persecution of Christians, people started to relax. They abandoned prayer. They abandoned the life of prayer at home. And they lived like everybody else, secularly. So what did the faithful people that wanted to continue on the image that the church had in the first 3 centuries, what did they need to do? Needed to get out of the secular community and go into a place where they can continue on the life that they have seen in the apostles. They wanted to live which should be at home, the life that they saw in the martyrs. So they went to the monastery, to the deserts, and they planned their life. And they're usually, most of the monastic communities, some of them individuals, but most of them are communities. They come and meet and pray, they eat together, and they go to their business, whatever they're doing. And they come back and meet. By the way, you're very affectionate towards Saint Mina, the miraculous. Mariut, you ever read the story of the communities in Mariut? You'll be surprised. Where Saint Mina's monastery is, it was Conobians. What's Conobians? Is a community of families. They live together like monks. They have kids, and they have family life, but they live like monks. They come together for prayers 3 times a day, or 2 times a day, whatever they can, and they go and do their thing. And they become very attractive. Many families join them. So you think of monastic life just monks, celibate monks in a monastery? No, think again. They had it. What this means, that there is in the mind of God a certain way His family, God's family, the church should be. So in His mind, we are with Him constantly as a family. I would suggest to you, if you're not doing this, to really struggle to have it, you have to have a prayer time together. You have to come together at least once a day, at least. I know it is very tough, but we cannot be calling our homes Christian homes, godly homes, without having at least once a day gathering around the Lord and talking to Him. The acknowledgement as the head of the house. But what is the head of our house? Let me go and I'll tell you something that gets me disappointed very big. What do we really gather around? What do we gather around regularly? TV. I go to every house, and then the center of the living room is like a 68, that's the least. 68-inch TV. That's our uniting symbol. That's the symbol that we unite around. What is this? What's TV? Think about it theologically. What's TV? The world. The earth. Everything that's happening with humans everywhere else. Not heaven. Not heaven. A heavenly family should gather around a heavenly object. An earthly family gather around an earthly object and become their center of worship. That's how we spend time. Anytime a father or mother wanted to spend a holiday or a weekend, they say, let us, in the old times when there's blockbusters, if you remember that place, Blockbusters. So they go and say, you're going to go to Blockbuster, get a pizza, come back and put the new movie. Everybody's saying it's a good rating, had a good rating, let's watch that movie. In the old times. Today, even that is not available. Even that. We just go on our phones and everybody's doing this thing or her thing. So that's what I think the beginning of it is. The beginning of it to be a godly church started by having a godly family. I will tell you something, this is something you get every time you go to the monastery. You will not know sitting here, thinking about what life they live there, what fruit, what results will come from doing a regular routine of prayer as a family. There's no way you can think about it, concept it right now. The only way you can actually realize is when you live it. It's just a mark of all living things, a mark of all real experiences, is there's no way you imagine it until you do it and practice it. So sitting here and telling you about what it feels like to be in a regular prayer with your family is not going to help you. I'm telling you, this is an item on the menu that I cannot explain to you. Just going to tell you, it's really good, just taste it. I can't tell you anything else. When you do it regularly in the house, you will harvest a lot of fruit. a lot of fruit. And then there is no end to the list. When we go into the book of Acts, this is how it was. And in the book of Acts, you get the idea. It was both a family and a church. It was a family and a church. Not just a family, not just a church. Here, after Jesus has assembled, had told them to stay together, and then he left and went up to heaven. And when they had entered the upper room, they went up into the upper room where they were staying, and he lists the names. These all continued with one accord in prayer and supplication with the women, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. And in those days, so what happened when they left, after they left the mountain of Olives, they went to the upper room, and they were not doing only a Sunday thing. They were in this upper room together praying. And this is the image. It's given to us repeatedly in the book of Acts. Repeatedly. And they are talking to each other, they're eating together, they're praying together. And then in chapter 3, they go to the temple to pray the hours, the Akbiyah. So there's a distinction here. They go to the temple to pray the Akbiyah, the hours, but they stay in the upper room and they have their own prayers, they have their food, they have their eating. When the church is getting bigger and bigger, we're not told where they stayed. 3,000 men and their families, how would they do this? But I'm thinking they were divided into the families, and everybody was doing their thing in their home, inviting others, and they end up by coming together and praying. So there is this nuclear church, that little church in every house. It's just not real, or there's something about it that's not very, not in harmony. That I know that everybody's doing their thing at home, and when they come to church we pray. That it doesn't seem like real. It seems like we're putting on some other face, other mask when we come to church. But at home, we're not the same. Abuna don't follow us at home. So this is something for us to think about. And something for us to start planning. If that's what you want to pass on to your kids. If this is what you really want your kids to continue doing the same thing. One day for God, 2 hours for God on Sunday, or 3 hours. And then the rest of the week is for the world. The beginning of the church is a family. Let me just summarize that. The beginning of the church is a family. You got a godly family, you got a godly church, and there is nothing stands in the face of those godly churches. And let me just tell you, here in St. Paul, we're borrowing a space from the Roman Catholic, and thanks to the bishop and to the priest of this church to give us this. But think about it, the first church didn't have a building. Sometimes we say a church in the mind of everyone, and the children especially say, oh, we have a nice church, nice building. That's not what we're talking about. The book of Acts talks about the first church as no building. There was no building. Forget about this idea. The church is not a building. The church is the people of God assembled together with the Eucharist and the bishop. That's what the definition is. Like a family. You cannot have a single person or a single item as a family. You have to have a father, you have a mother, and then if they have children, God bless. But at least that father and mother, they have that husband and wife. You cannot have a family as a single person. So the same thing, you have the believers, you have the Eucharist, the meal. It's beautiful to see a family around the table when they're eating together. That's the image. That's why in the Orthodox churches we have an icon behind me on the top of Christ, the bishop, the Eucharist, the bread and wine, and the apostles. That's the church. In the garden also, there was the trees, the garden, the food, and the Adam and Eve, and then the Lord who visited them all the time. That's the beginning of a church. May God give us the wisdom to be His people, to be really belonging to Him, and not to belong to the world. We might say whatever we want to say, but the reality is what we do. Tell me who you are by what you're doing, not by what you're saying. That's hypocrisy. To Him is the glory Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and forever.